The Behemoth, an immense vessel crafted by the finest minds of the Galactic Coalition, floated silently in the shadow of Earth's moon. Its sleek black hull absorbed the light of distant stars, making it nearly invisible against the void of space. Aboard the ship, the crew of highly evolved alien beings, each representing one of the Coalition's member species, observed the planet below with a mix of curiosity and dread. In the command center, Captain Zyrax stood tall before the primary observation window, his 4 eyes fixed on the blue-green orb of Earth. His scales, a deep iridescent purple, shimmered under the dim light of the control panel. Beside him hovered Zalnir, an elder council member whose translucent body glowed faintly in the shadows, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of experience. "They are a primitive race, Captain," Zalnir said, his voice calm yet laced with apprehension. "But their history, there is something unsettling about them." Zyrax nodded in agreement. "Indeed, Counselor. Their development is unlike any other we've encountered. Most species progress steadily, guided by a sense of self-preservation, mutual cooperation. But humanity, they thrive on conflict." Zalnir gestured to the holographic display in front of them. On it, scenes of human history flickered, tribes waging war over barren lands, empires rising and falling in bloody conquest, world wars that devastated entire continents. The crew had been studying the planet's history for days now, and the more they learned, the more disturbed they became. "They've built civilizations on the backs of war," Zalnir said softly. "No species in our records has such a long and bloody history. And yet they continue to survive, even prosper." Zyrax turned away from the window, his eyes narrowing as he examined the display more closely. "Survival through violence. Adaptation through war. It's unnatural." "Not entirely," a voice cut in. Dr. Vrilka, the ship's lead xenopsychologist, approached the command center. Her skin, a soft shade of blue, shimmered as her translucent wings fluttered gently behind her. "There's more to them than just violence. Yes, they are warlike, but they're also capable of profound acts of compassion and creativity. They've built wonders, cured diseases, and explored the very stars we stand among." Zyrax grunted, unconvinced. "And yet they've nearly destroyed themselves multiple times over. How many species have invented weapons capable of annihilating their own planets?" Vrilka raised an eyebrow. "And how many species have shown the resilience to rebuild after such devastation? Look at their history again. They've suffered calamities, but they always rebuild, always find a way to survive." The tension in the room grew as the alien crew members around them silently observed the exchange. Zyrax was a pragmatist, always calculating threats and determining the most efficient way to neutralize them. Vrilka, on the other hand, believed in understanding, in finding balance. It was an old argument, one that had played out countless times in the Coalition's history. "They may not be a direct threat now," Zyrax finally said, breaking the silence. "But they're expanding. Faster than we anticipated. If they continue like this, they'll reach the outer colonies in a few hundred cycles. And when they do, what then? Will they greet us with open arms, or will they bring their wars to our doorstep?" Zalnir's voice, quiet but commanding, interrupted. "That is what we must determine. We must learn whether they can be reasoned with, or if their nature makes them too dangerous to allow into the greater galaxy." Zyrax's eyes gleamed. "And if they are too dangerous?" Zalnir hesitated, then spoke with a tone of finality. "Then the Coalition will have no choice but to act. Humanity's expansion must be controlled. For the safety of all." The crew members exchanged uneasy glances. No one said it aloud, but they all understood what that meant. The Coalition had dealt with dangerous species before, though rarely on this scale. The extermination of an entire species was always a last resort, but it was not unprecedented. Vrilka, sensing the gravity of the moment, spoke up once more. "We must be careful. Humanity is volatile, yes, but they are also unpredictable. If we rush to judgment, we risk creating the very threat we fear." Zyrax folded his arms. "We will proceed with caution, but we must be prepared for the worst." As the Behemoth silently orbited the Earth, the crew continued their observations, delving deeper into humanity's history, culture, and psychology. Every new revelation seemed to paint a more complex picture of the species, one that was both fascinating and terrifying. In the stillness of space, the debate raged on. Would humanity rise to join the stars, or would they drag the galaxy into their endless cycles of war and destruction? The decision, as always, would rest with the Coalition. But for now, one thing was certain: humanity's true nature was a horror the galaxy had never seen before. The dimly lit observation room aboard the Behemoth was eerily silent as the crew continued to study humanity. What had begun as a simple reconnaissance mission had turned into a grim psychological ordeal. Each new discovery weighed heavily on the minds of the crew, testing their resolve. Captain Zyrax stood at the center of the room, arms folded, staring at a new set of holographic projections. The footage flickered before them: wars, nuclear explosions, cities turned to ashes, soldiers charging into hopeless battles. He had witnessed many species rise and fall, but nothing compared to the raw brutality he saw in humanity. Each scene felt like a glimpse into madness. "They are not just primitive," Zyrax muttered, shaking his head. "They are chaotic." No sense of self-preservation. From the far end of the room, Serka, a towering warrior of the Bilshan species, snorted in agreement. His massive form leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his armored chest. "Weakness. Their constant warring shows a lack of control. They are fractured, too many tribes, too many leaders. How do they survive?" Dr. Vrilka, sitting quietly at the holographic console, looked up, her blue skin shimmering softly in the dim light. "It's not that simple," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Yes, they are divided in many ways, but look closer. When faced with true disaster, they unite. Their wars are terrible, but they also bring out something unique in them, a kind of resilience we've never seen before." Zyrax frowned, unconvinced. "Resilience through destruction? That sounds more like madness than strength." Vrilka turned to face him fully. "Madness and strength are not always separate. Their history shows that their darkest moments often produce their greatest leaders, innovations, and even acts of compassion. When the humans nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear war, they built alliances, created peace treaties, and formed global organizations to prevent further disasters." Serka grunted, unimpressed. "Temporary solutions. Their history is a cycle of conflict. They destroy, they rebuild, then they destroy again. There's no honor in that." "But there's something more," Vrilka persisted. She gestured to the display, showing images of human achievements: space exploration, monumental works of art, moments of selflessness. "They are capable of incredible things despite their chaos. Maybe because of it. Their ability to adapt and overcome impossible odds is unlike anything we've ever encountered." Zyrax shifted, still uneasy. "And yet we can't ignore the threat they pose. If they can wage war on themselves so easily, what happens when they turn that violence outward?" Vrilka sighed. "That's the paradox, isn't it? They are dangerous, yes, but also full of potential. We've seen species destroy themselves before they could reach the stars, but humanity is different. They survive no matter the cost." A long silence followed. The crew, haunted by the images of Earth's violent history, grappled with the questions that loomed over them. Could such a species, so driven by conflict, ever find peace among the stars? Or were they destined to spread their chaos wherever they went? Zyrax finally spoke, his voice cold and resolute. "We must continue our observations. But we cannot wait forever. If they become a threat to the galaxy, we will have no choice but to intervene." Vrilka nodded, though her expression remained troubled. She knew that the line between potential and destruction was razor-thin, and humanity was walking it. But in her heart, she believed there was something worth saving in this volatile race, if only they could find it before it was too late. Outside the Behemoth, the Earth continued to spin quietly in the void, oblivious to the debate raging in the shadows above. Panic spread across Earth as strange anomalies disrupted satellite feeds and communications networks. At first, governments dismissed it as a technical glitch, but when the pattern became unmistakable, military leaders around the world convened in secret. Something large and unknown, was lurking just beyond the atmosphere. Inside the command center of the Behemoth, the crew watched with growing unease as humanity responded to their cloaked presence. A series of reconnaissance aircraft and space probes had been launched from multiple nations, scanning for signs of the intruder. "They've detected us," Zyrax growled, pacing the command deck. His normally cool demeanor was now tinged with frustration. Primitive yet persistent. Zalnir floated beside him, radiating calm. "We knew this moment would come. Their paranoia was inevitable. They are not prepared for what they will find," Zyrax said, his voice hardening. "And yet they seek us out like hunters." His four eyes narrowed. "If they engage us, we will respond accordingly." On Earth, the situation escalated quickly. Military forces across the globe had come to a rare consensus. Whatever was out there was a threat, and it had to be neutralized. For the first time in modern history, humanity united, not to fight each other but to face a common enemy. The first response came from an orbital defense platform, hastily armed with missiles and experimental weaponry. In a desperate move, the Earth's coalition fired a barrage of rockets into the dark void above the moon, aiming blindly for the anomaly that had disrupted their systems. The Behemoth shuddered as the first explosion rocked its hull. Zyrax's eyes widened in shock. Impossible. How could they? They must have detected the disturbance in our cloaking field, Dr. Vrilka said, her voice strained but calm. Their technology is primitive, but they are resourceful. Zyrax slammed his hand onto the control panel. Engage shields. Prepare to counterattack. The ship's defense systems activated, and the next barrage of human missiles disintegrated against the shimmering energy field surrounding the Behemoth. But the damage had already been done. The humans had struck first and now they knew there was something out there, something hostile. Serka, watching the Earth on the main display, bared his teeth. They fight without fear. Even against the unknown. Zyrax's expression darkened. They are reckless, but they've made their intentions clear. As the crew scrambled to stabilize the ship's systems, a communication signal suddenly pinged across their channels. It was a broadcast from Earth and it was directed at them. They're attempting to communicate, Vrilka noted, surprised. Put it through, Zyrax ordered. A message appeared on the main screen, transmitted in multiple languages, the meaning clear. We know you are there. Explain your presence or we will consider you a threat to all of humanity. For the first time, humanity had spoken to the galaxy, not in fear but in defiance. Despite their technological inferiority, they had stood their ground and demanded answers. Zyrax's gaze hardened as he read the message. They are as bold as they are dangerous. This changes everything. Vrilka, watching the display in awe, whispered, they're not what we expected. They are more than just a violent species. They are fighters. Zyrax turned away from the screen. Then we must decide how to respond. Because they will not back down. The Behemoth limped through space, its sleek hull scorched and systems struggling to recover from the unexpected human assault. Deep within the ship, the mood was somber. The humans had struck with such ferocity that even the most advanced vessel of the Galactic Coalition had been rattled. Zyrax stood in the war room, surrounded by his senior officers, their faces grim. They should not have been able to touch us, Zyrax muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. And yet they breached our defenses. They are not just a threat, they are unpredictable and that makes them dangerous. Zalnir, who had remained composed despite the growing tension, floated closer. We must report to the Council immediately. Humanity's aggression cannot be ignored. And what will the Council do? Dr. Vrilka interjected, her calm voice cutting through the room's tension. She had been the voice of caution from the beginning, urging understanding instead of destruction. Exterminate them? Destroy an entire race because they dared to defend themselves? Serka, leaning heavily against the wall, grunted. They fired first. They proved they are dangerous. Vrilka's eyes flashed with frustration. Dangerous? Or desperate? We intruded on their world, triggered their defenses. What did you expect? Submission? We've miscalculated them from the start. Zyrax's fist slammed against the table. Enough. This is not a debate. We have orders to observe and if necessary contain any threats. Humanity's recklessness endangers the galaxy. If they spread, they will bring their wars with them. Vrilka stepped forward, her wings unfurling slightly as she faced Zyrax. I've studied them longer than anyone aboard this ship. They are volatile, yes, but they are also capable of great change. Look at their history. Every time they teeter on the edge of annihilation, they find a way to pull back. They survived the nuclear age, they've learned from their mistakes. There's more to them than violence. And yet, violence is what we've seen, Zyrax countered. They nearly destroyed us without understanding what we are. And we nearly destroyed them out of fear, Vrilka shot back. We must not make the mistake of underestimating them, or worse, of reacting with the very aggression we accuse them of. Before the argument could escalate further, a chime echoed through the room. Zalnir turned toward the holographic display. A signal from the Council. The screen flickered, and the stern face of a counselor appeared, eyes burning with authority. We have reviewed the reports from the Behemoth. The situation is more dire than we anticipated. Humanity's aggression cannot be ignored. Zyrax straightened, his voice calm but firm. What is your decision, Counselor? The Counselor paused, the weight of the galaxy resting on his words. Proceed with neutralization protocols. Humanity's expansion must be stopped before it threatens the stability of the coalition. The crew stood in silence, the finality of the order sinking in. Vrilka's voice broke the quiet. This will be genocide. You're condemning them without understanding their full potential. The counselor's eyes narrowed. It is not potential that concerns us. It is their capacity for destruction. As the transmission ended, Zyrax prepared to carry out his orders. But before he could act, alarms blared across the command center. "They've hacked into our systems," a technician shouted. "They're disabling our weapons." Zyrax's eyes widened in shock. "Impossible. How could they?" Vrilka smiled faintly, watching as the humans once again defied the odds. "They adapt faster than you think, Captain. They always have." The Behemoth's weapon systems went dark. Humanity had struck back once again, not with brute force but with ingenuity. Zyrax stared at the display, realizing the true horror of humanity. They were not just warriors. They were survivors. And now the galaxy would never be the same.